everybody. Welcome to my talk and the final talking space of JCon 2022. It's been a pleasure to be here. I got to speak yesterday, and I'm very excited to help close out the event. It's been an amazing event. So I live in Chicago, Illinois, right by the lake. I've been a developer advocate since about 2016. You can find me on Twitter at MC Dwayne. Please reach out to me there. I'm happy to talk about literally anything outside of tech. I love improv, karaoke, rock and roll, knitting and crochet. Now, I have a lot of interest, but go find me on Twitter and hit me up there. I work for a company called Gitpod. We are a code security platform. We help with secrets detection and remediation. So if secrets are leaked out there, find out that they've been leaked before the hackers do. That's the long and the short of it. Go find out more at gitguardian.com, and that's about all I'm going to say about them for this presentation. So before we get started and we go any further, a lot of ideas I'm going to throw at you today aren't going to be actionable unless you go act on them. They're not things you can like put into your Java pipeline or into your daily best practices. It's something you're going to need to go and explore on your own. So while I'm going to throw a lot of good ideas at you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions, it's really up to you to go implement anything that I'm going to talk about. So why am I giving this talk? Well, that's the first thing in their table of contents. I'll tell you why. Then we'll go through history of development, intro into cloud development environments, why you should do it, why you might not do it, and how to make a transition plan if you think it's a good idea to even explore it. So why am I giving this talk? Well, I've had this particular conversation with a lot of people, and it kind of developed into sharing the same resources over and over again. So I thought, well, why don't I just package it up as a talk and then present it to people I don't know. That's a lot of you out there. I don't know everyone here at JCon. Hopefully I'm going to motivate some people out there that have been on the fence of taking a look at this stuff to go out and take a more serious look. If you're running a small team or you're building a team within a larger organization, maybe this is the motivation you need to go actually investigate this a little bit deeper. And honestly, I just think the whole thing's neat. It's really fascinating to me to watch us evolve from local machines and all the problems that brings to moving everything to the cloud. So I'm just kind of sharing my passion with y'all here. And I would actually encourage you all to do that. If there's a bit of technology, even if it's not directly related to your job, that you think is just neat, you just think it's interesting, go write a talk about it. Go explore it deeper and share that knowledge. I encourage everyone to. I'm not some kind of expert with a PhD in this stuff. I don't think anyone is a PhD in web dev environments yet, but I'm just a guy that said, hey, I'm willing to give a talk about what I know because I'm passionate about it. And I encourage all of you to go out and be that person too. So let's look at how we got here. This is not too detailed, and you might say this is a little too high level, but I think it's important to understand how we got to this point in history. So let's start all the way back at the beginning. And the first people that had text and images for other people to discover were doing it with some very cheap and remedial tools that were easily available. And it was really hard to hack these things. You could defend it with a club. And unfortunately, though, packet loss was inevitable as soon as you walked away. Forward in time just a little bit, and we get to the loom. The loom is arguably one of the things that gave us the modern computer. That's what Babbage built and Lovelace were working off of, was the punch card that they would use to run looms to make cool patterns and to build computational engines. And we would pass these notes into a computer in big batches, do batch processing. The development experience was arguably worse than a stick, burned stick that you could write on a wall with. But security wasn't that bad. As long as you had physical lockdown access to that room or to your desk where the cards were, then you know that nothing really bad was going to happen in there. Debugging's a nightmare, but that's a whole other story. And then we jump forward in time and we get shells. There's others than seashells. Seashells just made an interesting title here for me that I like to play on words. But now instead of passing paper notes to a machine and in batches, we can write individual lines of notes to a machine and get immediate feedback. And now everyone's got a shared way to do this. Punch cards were specific to that machine and that particular developer's understanding of that operating system that they probably wrote. Now we have Unix for the first time. Everyone's kind of agreed on the standard. And everybody's learning things like C. And again, I'm just picking on C here, but there's plenty of other languages out there that developed at the same time. But at the same time, this is also the first time that everyone's got that shared, we can write something for here that works over there and collaborate on those things. And it's not a lot of people yet. It's maybe hundreds of universities and governments at this point that can afford the machines that can run this. And then we jump forward just a little bit. It's fascinating to me that it only took 11 years between Bourne writing Bourne Shell, or SH, the thing that won that Bash is based off of, 11 years from that to the first website. That's how fast the world started changing. And that's what the age of the personal PC brought us. And instead of these giant honking machines that you had to have special access to behind these locked doors, now we had millions of machines that anyone can afford, almost anyone can afford. They're still kind of expensive in the 90s, but it drops dramatically where everyone can afford a computer now. And it's also brought us the age of HTTP servers, Apache just being the first non-commercial, widely distributed open source one. That now every machine in the world can be a server, but it's also the environment where you're building what it's serving. So it just works because it works on your machine means it works in production. It's the same thing. And then we get to the 2000s and Martin Fowler writes a seminal paper on CI/CD and everything changes. I don't think it changed because of him, but it's important to note that he's a way we can mark time. We have millions of machines running, and now it's cheaper to run someone else's computer and just run your infrastructure on top of that. And now everything's part of a pipeline, and microservices emerge. Because if you're running on a monolithic box, you have to write code that runs on a monolithic box, but you're not writing on that box anymore. But as we decouple architectures, suddenly it makes more sense to run architectures on a lot of machines at once. And now developing on a single machine that's outside of that system stops making sense. It worked on my machine. People were saying this before, but this is the era of cloud computing where it really, really blows up. To the point where the old joke, it's not that old of a joke, it's okay, it worked on your machine, we'll just ship your machine. And that's how Docker was born. And we're watching this pendulum kind of swing, I think, back toward this idea of central computing. We started with, there's one thing we interact with, there's one wall we interact with, there's one set of punch cards we interact with, there's one giant Unix box we can interact with. And then all of a sudden it went to everything's local. Everybody's running their own. Everything's distributed at a point, a local basis. And now with cloud computing, we're moving back the other way. And then this happened last year. I don't know if y'all saw this announcement, but this is what motivated this talk, this one blog post from GitHub. Their engineering team abandoned local and now battle hardens CodeSpaces, their cloud environment. I'll talk about CodeSpaces a little bit more in a little bit, but it turns out they're not the only ones doing this. A lot of organizations are abandoning the local because I think, to bastardize Jeff Atwood's law, if it can be done in the cloud, we're going to do it in the cloud. And it will be done in the cloud. And that's the reality we face. And unfortunately, I think a lot of the conversation around this is kind of lost on how does this affect me as a developer versus how does this affect my team and how can my organization benefit from what's going on with all of this. And that's really what I'm hoping to inspire you all today to go have that conversation internally and take the rest of this back with you. So what defines a cloud development environment? Well, that's the first one. You don't own the hardware in the cloud. You're just using somebody else's. And they're built on containers, so they're super efficient. And that means because it's running in the cloud, any computer with a browser now can run any IDE, can run any crazy setup you want. Throw as much memory as you want at it because that memory is on a giant server that you can just keep provisioning memory on. If you can access the internet. I tried to find a Commodore 64 running Firefox or any kind of modern browser. I don't think that's possible to Commodore 64 unless you gut it, but you could theoretically do it on an iMac. Because this is just containers and just run in the cloud, you configure it with code. And then instead of having to go, okay, now download this and now set this up and now change this configuration and make sure that this matches that, and all the pain of that onboarding experience, it's all right, bam, we'll drop an exact copy of what's in production into your environment, and now you can work there. And you can make them very, very use case specific. Don't like NVM. I hate NVM. I don't like NPM in general. I'm not a node developer, but I don't know, I'm at a Java conference saying that, so probably got some support out there from y'all. But why have a different version in your local that you have to jump to and remember to switch with NVM or write NVM script when I could just have a separate environment that I change my URL to, and now I'm working in the right environment automatically. That's a very generic definition of what I think it means. And again, I'm just one guy who has read a bunch about this stuff. So here's a very, very non-exhaustive list I'm going to fly through so we can have enough time for questions toward the end. So forgive me if this goes a little quick. I will make these slides available in the Q&A afterward. So very much a non-exhaustive list of what's going on out there in the world and what I think people should be aware of. Again, not all the players, I'll stop harping on that, but I put them into 5 big buckets. I think maybe I should have put them into 6, and I'll explain why as I go through, but here is generally how I see the world out there. One is the complete local replacement. This starts with CodeSpaces from GitHub. This starts with the ones that their devs who are on the front line of the internet are relying on day in and day out to get their work done. And as you can see from the screenshot from their front page, you can get up to 64 gig of memory for a machine and any number of cores you want, up to 32. And this is not a cheap option. Look at the cost here per hour. This is going to get expensive quick. So know that going in, but know that this can do anything and it is rock solid if you're a huge fan of GitHub and Microsoft in the long run. Gitpod, well, there's an alternative for you. Faster, more resource efficient open source platform. It is an open source platform, so you can get your hands on it and run it in your own cloud for free if you want. And there's a free cloud version for people up to a certain number of hours and a certain number of transactions. And then they have an enterprise as well. It's up to $39 a month. So very, very manageable. I understand my cost, which I like a little bit better than the per hour costs. Coder, if you want to run your own out in the cloud, yeah, Coder's got a free open source version. You can just deploy to your private network, your private cloud, and run it. Or they will run an enterprise. There is no middle ground. There's no self-serve option here. It's either completely you're on your own with their docs and their awesome community. I'm not knocking their community at all. It's awesome. Or you pay them an enterprise price to do this for reals and to customize it for your needs. Code Tasty, I think it's a weird name, but it's pretty rich. Not as rich as the other environments I could find. It's not, I think, apples to apples with CodeSpaces or Gitpod just yet, but it's getting there. And again, the free model, you're going to see this a lot. There's a free to get started and it monthly cost as we go on. And then we get to the big cloud providers. AWS bought Cloud9 a while ago. I used to talk about Cloud9 in a former life, in a former talk, a previous talk I made, about being an online IDE or an online code editor. And it was my favorite. And then it got bought by AWS and turned into AWS Cloud9, which is their whole local or cloud development environment. Like everything else at AWS, it's either free or question mark. I can't figure out their pricing. If anybody out there can help me completely understand and guess at their pricing, I would love to talk to you, because I have never figured out AWS pricing, but I'm not an AWS person. If you're a Google person, Google Cloud Shell is awesome. I didn't even know this existed before I started writing this talk a few weeks ago. But once I found it, it was like, wow. But their big selling point is Docker's already there. You don't have to set it up. You can just run your Docker compose commands like right there and build and run your Docker right there. Again, just like AWS, the pricing's kind of free, or I don't know. There's a calculator they have, and it's going to be specific to you. So I don't even want to guess at a price range for them, other than I know there's a free end because I deployed some things just to test it while I was doing this. Replit. This is that other category I think I should have added, and I might in a future version of this. There is a bunch of these, again, more than I've listed here, that are really focused on education and this learning collaboration ideal. Replit's the first one I found, and it's really modestly priced for what it is. It's free to $15 a month, depending on what you're doing with it and what your needs are and how big your team is or how big your educational setup is. And it looks like they have discounts for education. Itopia, this maybe should have gone slightly higher on the list, because if you go to their front page, it looks like they're very much student focused. But if you go dig into their enterprise side, they look like a Code Anywhere or not Code Anywhere, a CodeSpaces or Gitpod competitor. But this idea of streaming desktop applications to the laptop, it's kind of a weird thing to say, in my opinion. I've not seen anybody else call it that. And that's why this didn't come up on my radar until really recently. And the one I've investigated the least, honestly. But that's kind of what we're doing. We're streaming dev environments to a laptop. And that's just an interesting way to think about it. I have no idea what they cost. It's free to contact sales. And that's all I know about them. Gorm. I just like saying it out loud. But it seems to be tailored to students and for individual devs and for people working with notebooks, which we'll talk about later. So again, this could have fallen in a few categories, but up to $25 a month. It's yet another IDE you can use out there. Codio, very focused on students, and importantly, not just students in the academic setting. Looks like it's very, very geared toward self-taught programmers, people that are self-guiding themselves to become web developers or developers of any sort. Free for students and instructors. And then they have an enterprise plan, and I don't really understand that side of it. You got to request a quote to get any kind of details, and I didn't feel like doing that because I wasn't going to buy anything. I didn't want to bug their sales books. So that's the first big bucket, and that's the biggest bucket that I'm going to talk about. Just complete full stack replacements. So you don't need a local development environment at all, just a browser, and you're good to go. I personally am making this differentiation between that, where you can do anything in that environment, to something that's a little more dedicated to a specific project or a specific IDE. Again, you can modify these, and maybe you don't agree with my definition here. That's all right. This is open for discussion. Just one person's ideas here. Piazza Cloud, I really, really dig their marketing. They have an 8-second demo that tells you literally everything you need to know about their platform, in my opinion. It's weird pricing, but free to $21.78 a month. I don't know why they have that weird price, but it works for them. But this is for, hey, I'm building web things, and not a complete replacement for, hey, I need to build a COBOL or something like that, COBOL app or something like that. This is very much a, I'm building web things. You like Eclipse? Everybody loves Eclipse. Run Eclipse in the cloud, and you can do it for free. It's open source. Eclipse Che. There's a bunch of Eclipse projects, and I started getting confused about what actually is run by Red Hat, and do I include Red Hat? So I'm just going to push it out in that rabbit hole yourself. You're probably already more familiar with Eclipse than I am, eclipse.org. But you like Eclipse, run in the cloud, and do it for free if you do it on your infrastructure, or you pay Red Hat, but I don't know how much that costs. And if you like developing like it's 1999, Browxy. This was originally just a Java compiler you could use online for free. And it slowly has expanded from there. The blog posts I could find about it were really interesting to kind of tell the story of how it got added on. But to me, this feels exactly like I felt in college, like where I was using Java for the first time. It's blocky and I love it. But it's free to use, but it's not open source. So you can't get this and run it yourself. You got to use them and they want you to register. There's all sorts of terms and conditions. Shift Edit, it claims to be the original IDE for web development. I don't know what that means though. Maybe it is, but if you're developing web applications, then they want to be your IDE. And since they call themselves an IDE, well, that's why I put them in the IDE category. Again, maybe this belongs in another category. Maybe the IDE is even the wrong category here. But point is, they're $8 to $20 a month, depending on what your needs are. So there's no free plan with them. They start out being professional. All right. So we talked about web dev. I'm specifically saying web front-end dev is its own beast rather than full stack dev or back-end web dev or web application architecture or anything like that. Front-end dev is its own set of concerns, and that's seen the clearest in probably an example everyone already knows and probably your developers and designers already use, CodePen. It's been around a while. It is the social development environment for front-end designers and developers. That's directly from their website. I love that quote. And if you're doing it in the public, if you're willing to let everyone see your work, it's free. I know people that have learned to code from literally never touched a computer in their life or touched a development environment in their life to they building beautiful little websites and little projects and learning CSS and learning JavaScript in CodePen in the public, and they're sharing their work and it's beautiful. And because it's shareable, there are thousands and thousands of examples of what you can do with this thing on their website for free. But if you want to go private with it or you have enterprise needs, it's up to $39 per month per user. There's a range in there, but that's like the spectrum of it. But CodePen's awesome, and I think I'll stop talking about it because they're awesome, because everyone should probably already know about them. JS Fiddle, this was a new one for me. But you like CodePen, but you want not CodePen, and that's JS Fiddle. It's pretty much what I could figure out. It's a front-end code playground. Does the same thing as CodePen. It's just all built in JavaScript. Glitch, fun name. They seem to be a competitor for like Gitpod at a certain level. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's the next one. This is definitely a front-end experience heavy. So you go to their website and it's clear this is built for front-end designers. But they also support Node, which technically makes them full stack. But it's very limited. I feel very much like comfortable if I would send a front-end designer here that they would feel right at home. They wouldn't feel overwhelmed with maybe options and tools they don't really need. Almost didn't include this one, but very worthy of note is notebooks. I have been fascinated ever since Jupyter first came out. And at first I didn't like understand the concept, but the more I've been working in security and DevOps in the last few years of my life, the more I realized like, oh, operational run books are just notebooks applied to a thing. So notebooks are super important. And I think moving forward, this is going to be a prevalent way a lot of operational stuff is just done or thought of. So instead of running command line and then I got to integrate with another tool, I can just have a notebook that integrates everything for me in one place. And I can write my code below and get my chart, and I can then make a section below that to run the next command based on variables I would grab from the first command run and decisions I'd make off the chart it provided to make another chart, to then give me a set of options for what I need to do next. That's a playbook, not really a notebook, but playbooks are basically applied notebooks, I think. You can disagree with me with that. If you can send me a blog that explains that's not true, please do. I would love to read it. But anyway, there are three big ones I'm going to talk about because basically everything's just an implementation of Jupyter or Jupyter-like environments. So observable is the first one I'm going to mention. $3 to $40 a month. Lots of community examples. I got in this crazy rabbit hole when I was reading this, when I was doing this research, because I just kept clicking on these notebooks and just seeing all of this data that's just open and out there, from everything from weather patterns to traffic patterns to you name it, there's somebody's already written an example for you. And if you wanted to do this at scale, enterprise-wise, it's up to $40 a month per user. Microsoft Azure has a version of this. It's actually part of the Visual Studio experience with them, but Notebooks at Microsoft is where that crazy link there you want to go to. It's free to expensive, like everything else on Azure is. I don't know how much expensive is. It's one of those things I've got to do your own math. And Google has Colab, which is this is the most recent slide I added to this deck, because a conversation when I was reviewing it with a friend of mine, he's like, well, you didn't include Colab. That's arguably the best one. And I'm like, why is it the best one? He's like, that's the one I use. So you're going to find that a lot out there. When you ask people's opinion on any of these, you're going to say like, well, that's the one I like. And you're going to say why? And they're going to say, well, that's the one I like. And that might be the whole answer. But unlike anything else, or just like AWS and a lot of other things, it's free to expensive. I don't know what expensive means. You have to do your own math. And finally, the last category, very broad category I'm going to throw out there, and I would have included Cloud9 in this 2 years ago before AWS turned it into what it is now. But there's this not quite full stack, not really a full replacement, but very worth noting is Code Anywhere. Get a consistent editing environment, editing and development environment that connects to your servers. That's a very specific use case. That's what they specialize in. I think this is a great idea, and Code Anywhere has been around for a while. They're more than that, so I don't want to box them in just that corner, but that's what they specialize in, giving you a consistent IDE for any server you need to connect to. And I really, really dig that. But really the king and the winner in a lot of categories and areas is Visual Studio Code for the web. VS Code, if I was in the room right now with y'all in person, I'd ask for a show of hands, how many people out there use a VS Code on a daily basis? I would suspect a lot of hands would go up. I think they've won for two big reasons. One, there are multiple projects, including GitLab, who have completely abandoned building their own online editors because GitHub has this. Atom's even gone away because of this, or it stopped new development anyway because of this. The other one is that there, it's baked into github.dev. So hopefully this works. And yes, got there. So this is a silly little repo, doesn't really matter. But if you go to GitHub right now and hit the period key, and that's all I'm going to do, I'm going to hit the period key. Or actually, you know what? Since you can't see me hit the key, I'll go manually do it. I'll turn it into .dev right here. So you replace .com with .dev, or you just hit the period key and you get this experience. Well, you got to sign into. Crap, that didn't work because I forgot to set this up. In just 1 second, because I want you to see this. Authenticator 0. Good for one-time codes, because that is no one's going to get in here. All right, but here we go. Here is my IDE, or not my IDE, my editor for my GitHub repos, and I hit Control tilde and control backtick. And here we go. Terminals aren't available yet. So it's not quite there. I can, though, load it into CodeSpaces if I need it there. All right. So yes, cost is free with this. That's part of why it won. All right, back on topic. So why should you embrace cloud-based development environments? Well, there's some really good arguments for this. First, and I think the biggest one is onboarding is quite simplified. If you can just drop a new container, a new image into a container and have a full setup, get access to all the repos and all the tools from minute zero. I don't know if you remember your onboarding experience with tools the last time you got onboarded into a company, but it probably wasn't instant. It probably wasn't here's your machine already set up with everything you need and all the access already turned on. I'm not saying that this is a miracle that's going to happen and no one's ever going to have IT overhead problems ever again, but this is going to greatly reduce the costs, especially since we're cost per project instead of cost per machine now, which is slightly different. You're still going to need local machines, but you can get by with much cheaper machines. Like a $500 Chromebook is going to do the same as a $3,000 MacBook Pro with the newest chip and as much memory as you can throw at it, because all the computing is done in the cloud. And a lot of solutions already have IT admins in mind to give them better access to controlling things than other folks, or than other ways of doing it. I think the biggest benefit, other than the onboarding piece, is the dev and prod are going to be the same for the most part. There's, of course, going to be a little in there, but if they're the same image of the same environment, it should work, and it works on my machine, shouldn't be a thing anymore. If it works on your machine, it should work in production because they're the same machine or the same image of the same machine. This also makes testing tools that much easier to share. Because if it's, again, the testing environment or testing tools are already in the production environment and you're just cloning that over to your dev environment, well, that testing tool came with it. So now you can run those tests a little bit easier locally. Who here, and again, if there's in the room, I'd ask you to raise your hand. Who here has ever been in the middle of something important and all of a sudden, because you weren't paying attention to notifications and you were working in do not disturb mode, suddenly your machine restarts? That's happened to me a few times and made me want to pull my hair out and throw my machine against the wall because my machine needed right then and there to update because it was super important for security reasons. And that's just painful. The other big benefit is everything's version controlled because you're just config in a container. That makes security and IT management that much easier. And you need a new machine. Well, okay, now we do need to update this. Cool. Here's your new environment with everything updated. Just move over there and work there and throw away the other machine because it's just an image in a cloud. And all the kids are doing it. Again, I talked about this earlier with the education. I thought about maybe putting these slides earlier in the talk, but I thought it was better to get those examples out of the way before we talked about why you might want to. But this is actually a really important and big one. And I say that with all due respect. When I say the kids are doing it, that's just an expression here in America. But in reality, if you're learning to code right now, your code camp or your hacking community or whatever thing you joined probably already put you down this path. You probably didn't bother buying a fancy laptop and setting up everything locally. You probably just got dropped into a dev environment and started working there immediately. So going from that to get a real job and then getting a blank machine with Ubuntu on a thumb drive and saying, good luck, kid, or I keep saying kid, good luck, junior developer. That's not going to fly anymore. That's not a thing that people know how to do. I have had a disturbing number of conversations with people either about to go through coding camps or just fresh out of them who have never installed an operating system in their life. I'm a Linux nerd, so that to me is shocking. But if they're not installing operating systems, they're definitely not getting used to installing local tools. This isn't the future. This is happening right now. Go talk to your junior devs and ask them about their local dev experiences, and you might be shocked. And if you're someone that had something counter to this, let me know. I'm always looking for more examples. Again, these are a lot of just my opinions based on conversations and reading. But there are some reasons you might not go down this path, at least not yet. And here's the ones that I could gather from conversations. Sometimes local is better. I have a friend in the Drupal community who I tried to have this conversation with, and he was very polite. Dude is really, really nice, but he just kind of nodded his head and smiled and then said, yeah, and here's my setup and it works for me. And then he started talking about the thing he was passionate about. And it really put me on my heels for a second. It's like, yeah, this is an interesting topic, but if you're really focused on doing your job and getting things done for the community like Drupal, then maybe you don't need to go down this path yet. Or maybe you're just working by yourself like he does, independent out there. Or you're working in something obscure. Like I mentioned COBOL earlier. I don't think CodeSpaces is set up for COBOL or Fortran. And the world still needs those, unfortunately, or AS400 systems. Maybe it's not a con, maybe it's not a real thing, but you are maybe not your situation, but some people simply can't work online, truly in the cloud. Security reasons, military secrets, all that kind of stuff. There's just some people that like, cloud's not going to be their thing, and it's okay. Private cloud's a different matter. Probably do it. Other con is pricing. So free to start is not free long-term. It's free as in puppies. There's a lot of overhead that you need to think about long-term. Now you have ongoing licensing fees instead of I bought a computer and just need to maintain it. Also, you're kind of locked down on what you can do. If you are doing very experimental things and you're like writing your own boot sectors and trying to develop like your own version of Temple OS, shout out to Temple OS, the weirdest operating system of all time. Online dev environments probably aren't going to cut it for you. And sometimes you want to work offline. Well, that's a no. That's just a simple no. You can't work offline if you're working in a cloud environment. This one, I have mixed feelings about, but I do think it's a serious con to consider. If you go down one of these paths and you develop on the cloud all the time, then you're essentially choosing a vendor you're going to stick with for the next however many dev cycles you're going to stick with them, at least for the life of that project. And what happens if they change terms? What if they get bought like Cloud9 did? What if AWS eats them and now the pricing becomes completely unpredictable? Also, where's the data live? Who owns that data? You have to go through the terms of service to like figure that out. And that's a problem for any kind of system. Like, where's the data reside and who owns it, and what geolocation issues and data sovereignty laws apply. These are all questions you're gonna have to grapple with. So if I can't deal with any of that, then maybe this isn't right for you. But that's it. Those are the big cons. There probably are more pros too, but those are the big ones I kept gathering from people. So I would say just do it, but really you need to make a transition plan. How do you go from where you're at now to, maybe we should be moving toward cloud development environments? Well, the first one is step back and think about what you're actually trying to get done in terms of short, medium, and long-term goals. If they are to onboard 100 new developers in the next year and go down some really interesting paths with cloud web development or distributed web application development, then maybe this is the right thing. If you're a team of one who's already got an awesome setup and your projects aren't going to change at all and you're not going to explore new avenues in the near future for types of projects you do, maybe don't do it. I don't know. It's up to you. But if you do start down that path, make a checklist. I love checklists because checklists give us guidance. Write down what your pain points are with your current setup that you hope you'll solve with this, and then write down specifically what you need the tool to do. And then start evaluating. Like, I gave you a bunch to look at, but there's even more than that. And find, does it check all the checks on the box? And if it checks all the check boxes on the list, then maybe that's the right one. I don't know. Again, up to you. Doing the math for both sides. If you can't make a clear ROI statement, your business unit is not going to pay for this. They're just not. If the ROI is we're going to save $2,000 a year per developer by doing this, I guarantee you someone on the business end is going to say, why haven't we done this already? But I don't know what the reality is for you. Every company is different. Every organization is different. Every team is different. And unfortunately, I don't have an ROI calculator to give you because it depends on what your setup is. But that also means you should be doing the math for what your current setup is actually really costing you. What is the overhead of downtime because of local updates? What is the downtime for it worked on my machine? What is the QA time being spent for it worked on my machine? Start accounting for all of that in that cost and make that clear that what you're doing today isn't free and carries a significant cost to the business. That's a good way to move the needle in those conversations. And wrapping up here, ask around. Like I say, I've had this conversation with a lot of people, and as the Google Colab example, a buddy of mine couldn't explain why he liked it better. He just liked it better. Some people are going to just say that, but go ask the communities. Each of these has a community around it that's going to tell you the good and the bad and the ugly. And ask your colleagues what they think of this stuff and if they've tried any of this stuff. And they'll tell you, hopefully they'll be truthful with you and give you some good information to base some decisions on. And like anything else, start small. I wouldn't go to your CIO or your head of IT and say, look, we got a whole hog replace all of our local dev with one of these projects. I would say, hey, I got this one project coming up, and for that, I would like to test this out. Is that cool? Or if you're working by yourself or a very small team, just pick one and go with it. And if it works for that, do it for another one. And eventually, maybe you are like GitHub and you'll convert everything over to Code Anywhere or CodeSpaces or Gitpod or one of those. I don't know, but start small and let it grow from there. And the last question you really need to ask yourself is, do I really need this? Is this something I need to explore? And I don't have an answer for that. And I think this is where we're at with the conversation in general. An open conversation where all realities are possible. We got to balance things with the cost benefit of what we're doing now versus what can be done and what's right for your specific situation. And not knowing you, this is the best advice I can give you. Not really. Just the slide deck, which I'll share with you after I get done talking here in a second. So I've been Dwayne. I live in Chicago. Been a developer advocate since 2016. Hit me up on Twitter. I'm always happy to talk about just about anything tech related or not. And I'm happy to answer any questions in the few minutes we got left. All right. Recommend the following. Yes. Wonderful idea. Thank you very much, Sebastian. If you have other recommendations, please dump them in here because I'm going to open these myself. Or I'm going to actually save the chat and look at them later. Let me get you these slides. Share. And with a link, copy link. And hopefully no one hacked my GitHub because I should not have shared my even my one-time pass with you. I trust y'all, I really do, but I still have a squishy feeling in my stomach. I'm gonna go change my password right after we get off this, believe it or not. So thank you for not hacking me. JetBrains Spaces, yes, I should have included them. Thanks, Ralph. Again, a lot of that's something I guess I didn't really talk about, but it's pretty common out there. If there is an IDE or a I was done with this. If there is an IDE or a tool that for web development or for development at all, they probably are going down this route themselves and are making that happen. So JetBrains Spaces is a prime example of that. So really good. You know what? I'm gonna, when I revamp this, because I'm giving this later this month, or not this month, next month, I will actually include JetBrains Spaces in that. So thank you. All right. Any other questions or anything else I can do for anybody?
All right, Dwayne, so we can wait if in the next couple of seconds any questions income, but I think your presentation was pretty good and on point. We don't have that many questions.
Now, the last one from Ralph.
Oh yeah,
is,
there. All right, go for it.
Do you have any companies that are already picking this up? The only one I can point to that wrote a big old public blog post about it is GitHub. There are others that have mentioned it, but then again, how many companies write about their internal dev tools? Like, this is what we use. It's kind of that problem. Like, they want to keep it kind of close to their chest. GitHub had very specific reasons to announce the way they did because, well, they're trying to promote CodeSpaces. I would assume JetBrains is using JetBrains spaces internally. But aside from those examples, I have not seen any blogs personally. They probably exist out there. I just didn't see them. It's not something I was researching. So the short answer is no, I don't know. All right. I think that's it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.